don't know if you remember that movie, A Field of Dreams, Lee, but the big theme on that movie was build it and they will come, right? And I always say, when it comes to marketing and when it comes to content, just if you start producing the content, the market will tell you where it's supposed to go.
Influential and thought-provoking minds in marketing, sales, and business. The Business of Marketing Podcast.
Welcome again to the Business of Marketing. I'm A. Lee Judge. Nearly every piece of content on my website is a result of a question that a customer asked. There's no better source for what customers need to know than other customers like them who have asked questions. And my guest today is one of the biggest evangelists of this concept. He's taken 4 words, they ask, you answer, from a book to training and perhaps an entire movement. And I think there's something else too we're going to talk about today too for that. He's a master communicator and engaging keynote speaker, so I'm excited to have him on the show today. Welcome to the show, Marcus Sheridan.
All right, Lee, let's go, man. I'm all about this. This is overdue, so I'm pumped to be with you, with your audience. I've always loved your stuff. Plus, I'm excited for you and your book, so it's great, man.
Yeah, it's funny because we work in the space of sales and marketing and training people on content, and we both consume each other's content, but we have not met each other.
Right, it's how it works sometimes, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's like I see you every day. I'm saying, hey, that's a great point. I agree. Let's go further. And I said, you know what? One day we have to have a conversation. So this is finally that day.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I'm looking forward to it.
So I got a story to tell you first, Marcus. Nearly every service technician that comes to my house, they ask me what I do. And I say, well, I create content for businesses. And they say, well, that might not work for me because I'm an HVAC company or I'm a plumber. And then I tell them your story about your pool company and where, and how that happened. So catch us up on that for those who don't know the story. And this will help listeners understand why I tell this to every service person that comes to my house. Tell us about the pool company and how it got to where you are now.
Yeah, and I'll give the very fast version here. I started a swimming pool company in Virginia in 2001 called River Pools. And we were struggling to grow it. And we were just chugging along, and 2008, the market collapses, and it looks like we're going to lose the business. And it was during this time of just great fear and a lot of stress that I started to really research how buyers were changing and how the world was evolving. And we were becoming a much more digital buyer, and I could see the influence that online content was having on the buying decision. So I started studying these phrases that were newer at the time, like inbound marketing, content marketing. These are newer phrases, right? And so when I read them, I said to myself, okay, so basically what you're telling me is if I just obsess over my customers' questions and I'm willing to address them online, especially on my website, I might save my business. So I said, well, shoot, there's one thing I can do is I can really focus in on these questions that I've been hearing for years as a pool guy, because I was the one selling the pools. I can focus in on them. I can address them. And I brainstormed every single question I'd received over the years. And I came up with a couple hundred questions. And then every single night I'd get home, man, after a long day's work, and I would write out an article that addressed that question, that worry, that fear, that concern that people had about pools, in-ground fiberglass pools, anything like that. And make a long story short, we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. Mm-hmm. And in the course of doing that, our brand took off so much that we started manufacturing pools as well. And so we became the fastest growing manufacturer of fiberglass pools in the United States. And in 2020, I actually sold the manufacturing side of the business, but I still own the original River Pools, which is essentially one of the franchisee locations in Virginia. So I still own that, but it's an amazing ride. And, as I was going on this journey too, Lee, I was like, man, this is working. Everybody should be doing this. So I started writing about it. And as I started writing about it online on a personal blog, that's what led to me eventually becoming a full-time speaker, having my coaching company called Impact that helps companies now do they ask you answer.
Okay. So they ask you answer is in I know there's a second edition of that, and we're going to get into where it's going next. But first I want to ask you, you and I both regularly stand in front of audiences and teach the concept of driving business through content marketing. How is it that there are companies left who still don't realize the power of educating prospects through content?
That is That's just one of those oddities. But there's also a reason why most businesses fail. There's also a reason why most businesses are very average and don't turn a great profit and don't eventually just win big. And that's because they haven't become a known and trusted brand, which, in my opinion, is the goal of every business. You must become a known and trusted brand. And what I don't think a lot of people realize is just how much research buyers do today before they reach out to a company and fill out that form on the website or make that phone call or walk through the door, whatever it is. We, as buyers, do not like surprises. We want to feel like we know what we're getting ourselves into. There's two numbers that I want to share with you in your audience that are so significant. First one, which I talked about in the first two editions of the Ask You Answer, is the average buyer, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter, so there's no exceptions to anybody's listening, is roughly 80% through that buyer's journey by the time they reach out to a company. So in other words, they've done roughly 80% of their research, they are far along, and you're catching them, in most cases, at the tail end, not at the beginning, at the tail end. That number, if we go back 25 years when the internet was just getting started, that number is probably 20, 30%. So today it's roughly 80-ish%. Where's it going to be over the next 5, 10, 15 years? So we know the buyer's vetting us. We know they want this information before they reach out. They want their questions answered. They want their concerns resolved. They're obsessed with this stuff. And so they're going to learn from someone. The question is, are they going to learn from you or are they going to learn from somebody else? Now, the other number that I think is so significant, and then I'll shut up for a second, is 75% of all buyers say they would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. That's a stat from Gartner. 75% of all buyers say they would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. What's this mean? It means that we don't want to talk to a salesperson until we are ready, until we feel like we're informed and we're not going to make a mistake. And so there's two types of businesses in this world. Types that hear those two numbers, they complain about it, and they say, geez, I wish it was like it was in 1995. And then there's the type that says, that's opportunity. And that's every trend. It's an opportunity if you're willing to see it as such.
Yeah, on those two things, I want to tell you a story that I've experienced recently. Was I was trying to get my security system fixed, and I was Googling, searching for instructions on how to do it myself or who to hire. Every video I came upon that was good ended up being one company out of Florida. They had an instruction for every model, for every case. They just had a whole library. And so then I realized, well, they can't come fix it because they're not in my area. It made me think about you, because at some point you're in Florida, I think, and you couldn't sell pools to California early on. So I'm like, you know what? They're where Marcus was years ago. They can't sell to me. The funny part was when I finally got someone local to come to my house to work on it, he couldn't figure out something. So he Googled it, and guess whose instructions he took?
Man, that company should be making a cut.
Yeah. I said to him, you're lucky that they can't service me, because I learned from them. They've already helped me work through some problems. I like, know, and trust these guys, but they're in Florida. So if you could create this kind of content, you have a lot more customers. That's and right. You're speaking to the journey of the customer's journey of doing the research. You know, as long as we've been speaking on this topic, I remember saying from stage 65 and then 70, now 80.
Yeah, number keeps going, 85. Man.
It keeps going up.
That's it. It just keeps going up. We're infovores is what we are. We're obsessed with information, and we want to feel like we're getting a good value. And again, we just don't want surprises. We don't want to make a mistake. We have the information, so therefore we're going to use it.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. So this is somewhere where something we both talk about. I want to get your take on it. In the book that I just released, I have a diagram about what I believe it takes to become a trusted advisor for your customer. And I explain it as the intersection between influence, experience, and authority. When a person conveys these things to a prospect, they become a trusted advisor. But what's your take on what it takes to become your customer's trusted advisor?
Oh, I'm glad you say that. And I like that. I like that little framework there that you mentioned. I think it makes a lot of sense. Definitely vibes with me. So in the newest version of They Ask You Answer, which is releasing in the first week of April, I talk about the book is built around the 4 pillars of a known and trusted brand. Okay, the 4 pillars of a known and trusted brand. And here's the 4 things. If you want to become that known and trusted brand, aka advisor, I'll give you four simple steps, and it's going to sound very basic. It is, but in application, you see most companies fail. Number 1, you got to be willing to talk about online what others in your space are not willing to talk about. It's one thing to say what everybody else is saying. It's another thing to talk about the stuff that everybody else is afraid to talk about. That's a major trust driver. Number 2, you got to be willing to show what others in your space are not willing to show, specifically through video, just like you just said. So you got to be willing to say what others aren't willing to say. You got to be willing to show what others aren't willing to show. I could give so many different examples of this, but just one really quick example of that is, when we started manufacturing pools, we were the first manufacturer in the world that showed our entire methodology of manufacturing. A series of 8 videos, average 10 minutes long each. So we basically produced a movie that would teach you how to manufacture a fiberglass pool. These manufacturers were calling me up and they were like, Marcus, what are you doing showing all this, man? And it's like, there ain't no secret sauce. There ain't no secret sauce. It's all just Thousand Island dressing anyway, right? Stop thinking you got a secret sauce when you don't. So number 1, talk about what others are not willing to talk about online. Show, number 2, what others aren't willing to show online with video. 3, sell in a way others aren't willing to sell online. And hopefully we get a chance to talk about that one because that one is a big, big one, Lee. And then finally, number 4, be more human than others are willing to be with your brand. And as we see this rise of AI and technology, the companies that maintain that very human connection while taking advantage of these technologies, they're the ones that are going to jump ahead. So talk about, show, sell, and be more human. Those are the 4 pillars of a known and trusted brand.
This last 2 I want to talk about. The selling part. Go ahead and go deeper into that you mentioned.
All right. So, man, this one I'm fired up about, okay? And I mentioned that stat of 75% of all buyers would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. So what does that mean? Well, if you're going to take advantage of that trend, and again, that's how you have to think as a business owner. How do I take advantage of the marketplace where they want to be? When we say they ask, you answer, it's like not just what they ask, but what they behave. Well, you need to meet them in their behavior patterns, right? How they want to learn. You meet them how they want to learn. So they want control, which means self-service is the future. What I mean by that is allowing, especially your website visitors, to do things with essentially tools on your website that in the past they would have had to have done with a human interaction with a salesperson. No one really wants to talk to a salesperson, again, until they're good and ready. So there's different types of self-service tools. I'll mention a few here.
All right.
In the book, I talk about 5 majors. So one would be self-assessment. Self-assessment is when somebody does an interactive, like an interactive quiz or something like that, where they essentially get a score or like a readiness score. There's a really good tool out there for this, and it's called Score App. All right, by
know about it.
Yeah, and Daniel Priestley.
Yeah,
great tool, very inexpensive, very effective. Okay, so you give somebody a score. So, for example, in my case, let's say if I was HubSpot, I might have an interactive tool that says, does my organization really need a tool like HubSpot? And then it gives you an actual score by the end of 1 to 100. And you say, okay, at the end, you're an 89, which means, oh, you're high on the need on the need score. That's just an example. There's a million that we could do here. Okay, second one, so that was self-assessment. Second one is self-selection. Self-selection is whenever there's a buying experience, people have choices, and oftentimes they're debating between the choices. So could you give them some type of interactive experience where they answered a series of questions, and at the end, you gave them, based on their answers, a recommendation of which choice they should make. So like in my case, if you go to my swimming pool website, Lee, there's a tool that allows you to essentially figure out, should I get a fiberglass, a vinyl liner, or a concrete in-ground pool? Those are the three types of pools. Well, I only sell fiberglass. And so I want you, before you reach out to me, to know which type of pool you want.
Yeah.
So therefore, I've got this great interactive experience where you answer these questions and it gives you an honest assessment. And every single day, I recommend to people on my own website with this tool, you should not go fiberglass, you should go vinyl, you should go concrete. You see, that's ballsy. Most companies aren't willing to do that. I'm going to do that because I'm going to be the trusted advisor. So that's self-selection, right? When you make a recommendation to somebody. Third one would be self-pricing. And I'm hot on this one. You know, Lee, because I've been talking about this one for years. I've been talking about this one for years. When you're a buyer and you're on a website and you're looking for cost and price information, you cannot find it. You get frustrated, you get pissed, and you move on. And you move on until you find what you were looking for. And whichever company's willing to talk to you about cost and price, generally speaking, that's who you're going to call. That's who you're going to give your trust to. And companies constantly, they like to make these arguments as to why they can't talk about cost and price. They say things like, oh, every job is different. And it's a very customized solution, or there's a range to it. They say things like, I don't want to scare my competitors away, my potential customers away. What scares them away is when they can't get any information, by the way. That's what scares us. The number one reason why we leave a website is because we can't get the answer we're looking for. That's the number one reason. The number one answer we're looking for that we cannot find on websites in the world is roughly, how much is this baby going to cost? The thing about it is, Lee, people don't need an exact price. What they want to know is, am I in the game, baby? Like, can I even afford this? Like, give me a sense. You know, if I said to your audience right now, how much do you think a pool costs, an in-ground swimming pool costs? Most would have no idea. Many would say, I guess it probably costs about $50,000. True. That's pre-2020, baby. You're going to spend, in most cases, $100,000 or more on an in-ground swimming pool. So, a pricing estimator, self-pricing tool is the future. So, I predict every service-based business, at least 90%, especially in the B2C market, especially when it comes to things like home improvement, plumbers, electricians, landscapers, just go down the list, roofers, are going to have some type of self-pricing tool on their website in the future. Now, I'm so into this and believe in it so much, and I know it's a megatrend, that I developed a tool called PriceGuide.ai. So what PriceGuide.ai does is it uses AI and allows you to very quickly create a pricing estimator, key phrase, estimator, not quote tool. It's an estimator tool. And so somebody goes on there, let's say to your website, and they're like, how much, would it cost to, remove the trees in my yard? Let's say you have a tree removal company, okay? And so then the estimator, again, using AI, is going to say, all right, so if you're a tree removal company, here's a series of questions that you're probably going to want to ask. And you can modify the questions, and then it gives you, just built into the AI, it gives you a place to put in your price ranges for each one of the variables. Like, for example, what size trees are you going to remove? Is it small, medium, large tree? How many trees do you want to remove? Do you want to take the stumps out? So it's like, boom, boom, boom. It's going to give you the questions that you generally are going to ask. And then once you give it the variables and you edit it, modify it, then it's going to give you the code. You put it on your site, and bam, you've got a working price estimator. Now, this is what's wildly. This is crazy. We have now, I've got nearly a couple hundred now users of this tool. All right, it's only been out for about 6 months. It does soft launches, and I've been watching it. What's crazy is when somebody puts it on their site and really brings attention to it, especially from their homepage, on average, their website immediately, the day they put a pricing estimator tool on there, produces 3 times, 300% more leads than they were previously getting. 300% lifts in leads. Come on, let's
And this
go.
can be customized for any particular different kind of business?
Any business. And the B2B, B2C, the AI helps you do it. And the problem is a lot of people are like, I don't think I can do that. I'm like, yeah, you can. Because
They don't want to do it.
it's like they're not seeing the forest through the trees, because it doesn't matter really what you offer. If I came to you right now, like I remember I had this insurance agent on me and said, yeah, this estimator wouldn't work for me. I'm like, so you're telling me people don't want to get a sense for what their quote is going to be before they talk to you? He's like, no, they probably want to know that, but it's just, you just can't use a tool like that. It just would never work. Like an insurance is just, you got to send it out. There's too many variables. I said, hold up.
He's stuck in how things have always been done.
That's right, buddy. So I said to this person, I said, all right, let's say I came to you in real life and I said, can you give me a sense for roughly how much? I mean, I'm not going to hold you to a number, but can you give me a range as to how much I might spend on, XYZ commercial insurance or XYZ home insurance or whatever? And he said, yeah, I just have to ask you some questions. I said, okay, what are those questions? He said, I'd have to ask you this. I'd have to ask you this. I had to ask this. I need to know this. I said, great. You just built your pricing estimator. You just built it, right? So self-pricing is phenomenal. I got to tell you one other story about self-pricing tools. It's crazy
First,
story.
I want to connect some dots here real quick.
Yeah, please.
So we talked about the customer journey and that they want to do their own research up to like 80% before talking to somebody.
Right.
We talked about putting your pricing on your website. I want to connect those two dots because if a person is researching, part of the research is how much will this thing I need cost me?
Yes.
And if they are doing their research, say they're 60% through their buying journey, that last 20% before they call you could be, how much will this cost me? And if they can't finish their journey on your site, it isn't like they're just leaving you. They're finishing their journey somewhere else. They're diverted to anybody who can answer that last part to satisfy them. So the customer journey starts on your website, perhaps. They won't be satisfied until they get some answers that you're looking for. Pricing is typically one of those. So I want marketers to hear, if 80% of the journey is on their own and they need pricing, it only makes sense to include pricing in the journey.
Yeah, it is. Listen, I've got more data on this literally than any person in the world. I have, for a decade of my life, a big part of it has been dedicated to helping companies be more transparent online, to win more trust, generate more leads, and ultimately more revenue, more financial peace. And the number one traffic, lead, and revenue producing content across the board over the course of 10 years, not even close, it's cost price content. Cost price content. It is the number one question that people have in the market. In the book, I talk about there's basically 5 subjects that every buyer wants to know. It doesn't matter the industry before they reach out. And we call this the big 5 in the book. 5 main subjects. It's not the only ones, but this drives the economy of search. First one is, how much does it cost? Okay, so cost is number 1. 2 is what we call problems, negatives, objections, fears. We'll just call those problems, but anything that's a fear of buying the thing. Is the pool going to crack? Is it going to pop out of the ground? Is it going to look ugly? Like, those are fears. So number 1 is cost. Number 2 is problems. Number 3 is comparisons. We're obsessed with comparing things online. One product versus another product, one company versus another. We love to compare. So in the 4th of the big 5 is reviews. I mean, just think about how many times you've researched reviews online. The thing about reviews is we want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly, not just the positive. And then finally, number 5 of the big 5 is just what we call in the book best, or best, most, top. Once again, think about how many times you've gone online and searched best such and such or most such and such. Anything that's just like a ranking system or any extremes, we love to research online. So cost, problems, comparisons, reviews, best. Those are what we call the big 5. And if you want to become a known and trusted brand, if you want to talk about what others aren't willing to talk about online, these 5 subjects, businesses shy away from them, but they got to lean into them. Cost being the fundamental one. And I would just say this, too, Lee, just to kind of wrap up this cost conversation a little bit. Like I said, with all the data we have, it's the number one traffic, lead, and sales revenue producing content theme across the board by far. Number two, when somebody adds a pricing estimator like a price guide.ai to their website, if they highlight it strongly on their homepage, almost immediately we see a 3x in lead generation, 300%. I mean, just across the board. The other thing about price is, let's say there's different levels of how you will do pricing on your website. So level one, there's level zero, which is when you have a call for quote or get pricing, and it just gives you a form, and that just pisses people off. Okay, so that's level zero. Now, level one would be when you have a page on your site, which everybody should have, which is like a pricing page. And then on that, you want to really address 5 things. You want to teach the reader, listener, 5 things. What drives cost up for that particular product or service? What drives cost down for that particular product or service? Why are some companies expensive? Why are some companies cheap? And then finally, roughly, where do you fall? So those are the 5 main elements of a pricing page. In the new book, I talk about the perfect pricing page is what it's called, and there's like 12 total elements, but those are the 5 majors right there. And if you do that, you'll be in the top 5% of your industry because most people haven't done that. So that's level one. Level two is when you have a great pricing page that explains what I just said, plus you have a great pricing video that explains it and shows it well. All right, so that's level two. Level 3 is now when you have a pricing estimator on your site and they're able to get a price range. And then level 4 would be they could get an exact quote on your site. So those are the 4 different levels. Now, I don't suggest that somebody necessarily gets or gives their buyers an exact price. I understand this is oftentimes impossible to do because once you talk with them, there's like these other variables. If I price a swimming pool, for example, which I have a swimming pool pricing estimator on the River Pools and Spas website. I was the first manufacturer in the world that had that, by the way. We don't set the end price. The dealer does. But we could still come up with the estimator. And it's incredibly powerful. And we give a range like your pool's going to be 80 to 120,000. So it's a big range. So you can do it safely. But I couldn't say your pool's going to be 120,000 because what would happen is then we'd go out to the site and we'd say, oh, geez, they need a retaining wall. Homeowner didn't realize they need a retaining wall. That's an extra 20,000, and they would get all annoyed. So I agree, if you're listening to this, most people aren't necessarily going to have an exact price that they're going to give. But you should absolutely give a price range to address the question of just give me a feel, how much is this going to cost?
I think there's something else in there too that we can use internally. So you're definitely answering the customer's question about pricing and helping them along their journey. But something that we did recently, I think, and I'm just realizing this now, helped us internally because when a customer, so for us to give some context here, we do a lot of subscription work. They subscribe to do like podcasts, which is ongoing. They may subscribe to video series, it's ongoing. But one of the questions our customers often asked was, hey, we have this series for, say, a podcast, but we want to do one video. Can we do that? Their question was, can we do a one-off? And how much was it? And I'm realizing now what that did was those questions allowed us not to just create an article on it or content. It allowed us to realize what other product lines we needed to create.
That's right.
So we ended up creating a produce with you version of our podcast service that allows them to do more of the work themselves if they want to.
That's
some
right.
of them have teams who just don't have all the skills or the understanding how to do it. We have cases where we have large corporate clients who have ongoing podcasts, but they need some video of their executives. They're like, hey, we got to get our CEO to do this or, some SME to do this. We need one shot. How does that work? Can we do just one? And so we ended up spinning off a new product of a one-time recording session and explain all how that process goes. But those products came out of us out of the questions that they asked. And our answer was, now we have a new product line that's been successful because we responded to the customer's questions.
That's really smart. One thing that I try to constantly remind businesses of, I don't know if you remember that movie, A Field of Dreams, Lee, but the big theme on that movie was build it and they will come, right? And I always say, when it comes to marketing and when it comes to content, just if you start producing the content, the market will tell you where it's supposed to go. Let me give you another example, because that one you just gave is great. I'm going to give you another one that's just like a kind of a random one, but hopefully it makes sense to your audience. So I'm an avid fisherman. I've got a pretty successful YouTube channel called Saltwater Fishing University. This channel is all about offshore fishing, and we have a growing following. I have an offshore fishing boat in North Carolina. It's a full business. It's a full brand, whole nine. Okay. It took me 2 years. When I started this channel, I thought what people wanted to see was us catching big fish. That's what I thought. Eventually, once I produced enough content, I realized, wait. This is actually what the market wants. They want to see how hard it is to run a commercial fishing company as well as a charter fishing company. They want to know what's the story, what's behind the scenes to successfully do this and not like lose your life savings while you're doing it. That's what people are interested in. And so it's like I would have this like amazing video that was like we caught these fish and was just awesome. I'm like, this is a great video. Wouldn't perform. But I would do a video where we were talking about how much we were struggling with some of the expenses we were having with the boat. And all of a sudden, everybody's watching. Everybody's commenting. Everybody's talking. So the market will show you what your content is supposed to be if you listen well enough. What you just said there is the market told you, it's like, so there's some different packages that we could be offering with our services here because they keep asking about it. They asked, you answered, right? Very smart. That's business 101. Super smooth. Same thing. But a lot of people think you got to have this perfect content plan. You got to know everything out the gate. That's why they have a failure to launch. It's this quest for perfection, which, as you know, Lee, happens.
Never happens.
Is it? Come on now. That's never going to happen. We're all just figuring this out anyway. So that's a very, very important point that you've made.
So I want to ask you, kind of pivot a little bit and still talking about content creation, but I noticed that you are very purposeful about the content you create. A lot of talking head video of you talking directly to your prospects or your customers, same as I do. I want to get your take on, and I know we may both be a bit biased at this. I know I am, but getting executive-led content, getting your executives, your SMEs, your technicians who are actually building the thing to get on camera and talk to prospects and tell them not a sales pitch, but their stories and help them understand the company. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you're talking about this, Lee. If you remember, I said there's 4 pillars of a known and trusted brand. 4th pillars, be more human than others are willing to be. And I think it's now the fiduciary. It's like the responsibility of CEOs to get over themselves and especially get on camera. Yeah, because people want to connect with a person. It's like, what's the bigger brand? Elon Musk or Tesla? They're both big brands, but Elon's way bigger. And if you just go across the board, it's like, is Kylie Jenner the bigger brand or is her makeup line the bigger brand? It's like she's way, way bigger. And we're seeing this again and again. If you look at my coaching company called Impact, okay? Which is bigger, Impact or Marcus Sheridan, the brand? That's not even close, right? You look at your situation, Lee, it's like your name is much bigger than your company in the market. If we did a Google Trend search, right, it would be like way more people searching you than your company name. So this is the choice that you have to make as an entrepreneur. It's like, am I going to allow my personal opinions to screw up smart business decisions? Because if your personal opinion is like, video's not my thing, or I just don't really want to be on camera, it's like, well, yeah, but just signed up to do this thing called business. In business, you got to win trust. And to win trust today, that person wants to see you. They want to see who's behind the scenes here. Who am I doing business with? It's a big part of it. So I think this is going to continue to be a really significant trend. People wanting to know the people behind the brand. I think it matters a lot. And you could tell those stories on a multiplicity of levels as well. My coaching company's got a podcast, and we bring on all these different employees of like team members, which, it's like we've had probably 12, 13 different team members from my coaching company that's on there acting as a subject matter expert. What's interesting too, Lee, is a lot of CEOs are almost hesitant for their team members to get on camera, to use LinkedIn, because they're afraid that their brand's going to grow and that people are going to headhunt them. It's like, come on. If somebody wants to leave, they're going to leave anyway. So give them every reason to feel supported and to feel like, man, my boss loves me so much that they're helping me grow my brand as well. I mean, to me, that's what it's all about. So I think you make a really, really good point. We got to get in front of the camera. We got to understand that the personal brand in many ways is the future, much more so than the company or the corporate brand.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the employee too, because Content Monster, probably even before we officially launched, began when I was a marketer inside a company creating content, and I began interviewing the sales team because I knew that if I could get them to answer their objections on film,
yes,
then when they're at home sleeping, they could be on the website answering those same objections.
Yes.
And there was a whole lot of why should I do this? Or, maybe corporate worrying about their brand. But the result was that customers were able to continue their journey, talk to or hear from salespeople, not talk to them because they don't want to talk to them yet. They could hear from salespeople. And the best part was the sales team had better experience with the customers than marketers did. They had frontline experience. They knew the objections. They knew the words the customer used to describe things. And the language that the salespeople used in the video they created was much richer, both to the customer and even to SEO, than what marketing could create. Mm-hmm. And that was just when it was just sales. Now we need sales, HR, leadership, everyone to be creating video.
You were ahead of the game on that. This is why you and I, we think very similarly, right? And what's weird is, for us, this is obvious. It's obvious. Yeah. Of course, it's like, yes. And that's the thing too. When forever people have told me, it's like when they read, they ask, you answer. It's always been like, I just didn't get it until I read it. And I was like, oh, of course, it's obvious. Because really what we're saying is, you could almost call this golden rule marketing. Market to others as you yourself like to be marketed to. Pretty basic. That rule has worked pretty solid for about 2,000 years. Promise, it ain't going away anytime soon. And so, when companies push back on me and says, no, we can't do that. I'm like, yes, but if you were the buyer, would you appreciate this? Well, yeah, I would, but, and it's like, no, treat them as you yourself would want to be treated right now. No, I understand. It's like, you're like, I can't talk about cost. No, you can. You just can't give an exact price, but you can talk about cost. So let's talk about cost. Let's see what we can do. Like, I can't mention such and such competitor. Really? You can't? Or you just can't say anything bad about them? Because we don't want to say anything bad about them, but we can certainly talk about them. So, these are the things that we can do. So you have to look at it from what can we do versus what can't we do. That's easy, and that's the lazy person's game right there. You know what I'm saying?
So we're going to wrap in a second, but I got two more questions here. The first one is talking to marketers. So these are things that we know, and you said it's the golden rule. How do you convince their management? How do you convince leadership that content marketing, we know it's the long game. We know you don't see results in 2-3 months many times. How do you tell a marketer, what would you answer to a marketer who says, Marcus, how do I convince my boss that content marketing is important?
Man, this is one of the most significant questions any marketer can ever ask. I get two primary emails from people around the world that have read my book. First one is the business leader, that's saying, hey, we really need to get more trust, get more leads, etc. I think the Ask Your Answer is going to help us do it. Second email is from the frustrated marketing leader that says, I believe this stuff, Marcus, but I just can't convince my team. So what I'm about to tell you isn't necessarily a feel-good story or answer, but it's just the truth. And that is this. There's an old phrase that says, you can be a prophet to the world, but nobody will listen to you in your hometown. It's very true for a lot of marketers. You might be one of the greatest marketers in the world, but yet because you're at the company, because they're so familiar with you, when you bring new ideas, sadly, oftentimes they don't appreciate them like they should. Whereas they go to some event, some conference, or some hack like me comes in and gives a workshop, and then all of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh, why are we not doing this? And you look at your boss and you say, what the H are you talking about? I've been telling you we should be doing this for the last 5 years. I see that all the time, Lee. Because I have taught probably on a global scale, probably about 300 workshops around the world. So I do keynotes and I do workshops, trainings, okay? Just did one this week. I got another one next week. $1 billion company I'm going into next week, okay? And marketing team, this is a perfect timing that you asked me this. So this is a $1 billion company, huge brand. Head of marketing really wants to be more transparent online, wants to do more content. They get it. CEO, sales team, leadership team, don't totally get it. So what's the solution? The solution is I'm coming in and I'm going to help paint the picture because I'm not from their hometown. And because of that, they'll see me differently. And it's sad, man. It's not fair. It's not fair to the marketer, but that's the truth. Which is why I also tell folks, let me give you another example of this real quick, man. Somebody hears me speak and says, I want to take this back to my team. I'm like, whoa. Don't go tell your team about this. Like, what do you mean? Because they're just going to rain on your parade. Go to your CEO, give him or her, say to him or her, would you be willing to read this book? Because I believe this is very important to our organization. CEO is going to say, sure. And then you say, okay, I'm going to follow up with you in 2 weeks. Let's have a conversation about what you read. You don't tell them your opinion of it because it needs to feel like it's coming from them. I know it's just human psychology here going on, right? And so now they read it and you meet with them again and you say, okay, you've read the book. Tell me, what are your sentiments? But you don't say, hey, I read this book from this pool guy and he says we should talk about 5 things. And one of them is cost and price. So let's talk about cost and price on our website. That doesn't work, man. It doesn't work. So I know it wasn't a very good answer, but those are the answers, dude.
That's a great answer. And this is absolutely not a sales pitch to the listeners, but the answer is you may not be able to tell your boss. Hire Marcus or I to come tell your boss.
That's exactly right. And I say bring out Lee because he's the man. You've been listening to him for a long time, and you've got this great way about you. It's been fun for me just talking with you. It's like I see so obviously why people trust you. Because interpersonally now, outside of your videos, but interpersonally, you have a great energy. You come across as extremely, not just knowledgeable, but warm. I can tell you never probably ever recommend someone something that you yourself wouldn't have bought if you were in their shoes. That's integrity. It's all that is, but it's a beautiful thing and it's easy to pick up on. But that's the power of media, right? And this experience. And I know your listeners feel the same because they feel like they know you even though you haven't met them.
One time, Marcus, I went in to meet with a client and I had spoken to one person, to the VP of marketing of a bank, and he had been spreading my videos within his company. I didn't know that. I just knew I was talking with this one person. So I get to the office, I walk into the boardroom. There are 4 other people there that I didn't expect to be in the meeting, and they're debating which one of my videos they like the best. I had star power in the room when I walked in there.
That's it.
I didn't have to sell anything.
The media
I just had
cred.
to guide them because they had been consuming content from me amongst the circle of buying group members for months, and I had no idea. So that speaks to the power right there.
That's right.
And thank you for the compliment, by the way, but it made me think about a story where before I took my last corporate job, one of the jobs I almost took was being a consultant at Accenture. And I turned down the job at Accenture for this company I went to work for. Months later, I gave them the advice. I was the employee doing what you said doesn't work. I was trying to give the advice from what I knew. Boss wasn't hearing it. They said, go get an Accenture consultant to tell us. And I'm thinking, if I had taken that job, they'd have been calling me anyway.
Isn't that wild, man? That's wild.
That is wild. So to wrap it up, Marcus, you mentioned that your book now has a third edition, the title change. I want to know, one, about the book, and two, about what you've learned about book titles.
Yeah. And any marketer is going to love this. You'll appreciate this because titling has never been more important than it is right now, right? Especially in this like attention economy that we're in and people are just quickly scrolling. So we got to grab them. We got to hook people in very, very quickly. So all of our titles matter, whether it's your webinar, whether it's the book, whether it's the guide that you've got, whatever that thing is. And so they ask you answer, it's been a pretty successful book. It has sold over 100,000 copies, which puts it in the top 1% of all business books. But honestly, I believe it had the IP, the chutzpah to be a 1 million copy book. And to me, to a degree, it should have done better. One of the reasons why it didn't do better is because nobody walks by it on the shelf and says, I want that, unless they've heard me speak or unless it's a referral. You see, I learned from Rory Vaden, so Rory, R-O-R-Y Vaden, Hall of Fame speaker. He wrote the book Take the Stairs, and he's got a great company called Brand Builders. One of their specialties is helping people launch bestsellers. And he said he had made this mistake himself when he had written a few books, and he learned this later with some of his work with clients, and it's proven to be true again and again. So any great title should pass the I want, I wish test. So the person should be able to see it and immediately say, oh, I want that. So in other words, I wish I had Atomic Habits. I want a 4-hour work week. I want to win friends and influence people. Do you see the pattern? It's pretty easy to see once you hear it, right? Now, there's, of course, going to always be exceptions. But the problem that most authors have is they give the how as the title and not the payoff as the title. So they ask you answer is the how. But again, nobody's saying, I wish they ask you answer. I want they ask you answer, unless they were told you need to read they ask you answer. You feel me, right?
Okay.
And so this is why the title of this book is called Endless Customers.
Endless Customers.
That's
When's
right.
the release date? How
It
soon can we
is
expect
coming
it?
out the first week of April. So that's 100% like it's happening. It's done. It's out of my hands at this point. And you can go to endlesscustomers.com if you're listening to this right now, and you can get it. There's a bunch of, like with pre-orders, there's a bunch of bonuses that you can get with it. So it's endlesscustomers.com. But it really talks about where's all this content going in the AI game? What's the future of websites? What's the future of digital, being that, especially with search now changing too. I mean, there's so much going on here, right?
Yeah.
And so it's exciting times, but scary times for a lot of people. I'm pretty stoked about it. And so it's a very, it is on the front edge of really the whole content game and how to become that most known and trusted brand in your market. And if you want a clear system that shows you how to become the most known and trusted brand in your market, again, go to endlesscustomers.com.
Endlesscustomers.com. Marcus, I can't wait to read it. I love your concept on title. I'll tell you why off camera, because this is about you. I'm not going to plug my book here, but it's about you.
And you do. Plug your book, bro. I want to hear it.
Here's the funny part. So I'm thinking, okay, what is Marcus going to say about titling? Because my book is in the same place yours is, out of my hands. It's about to be released end of February. And I'm like, does this title stand up to what Marcus is about to say, or is it going to blow me out of the water? It does, Marcus. It does.
Oh, good.
The book is called Cash. And so to answer your question,
That's great.
you said,
It does.
what do you want? Yeah, cash. That's something that salespeople want. That's what businesses need to operate. It's cash. And it's an acronym for communication, alignment, systems, and honesty. But the title is called Cash.
Man, it is. It definitely passes that test. Well, good job. What folks don't realize, listeners, is I told him beforehand I've changed the title, and there's a reason for it. There's a system behind titles, and he said, "Okay, well," and I didn't know the title of his new book yet, so he said, "Let's save it until the end." And so that was real. What he just said is like he did not know what I was going to say, and I didn't know what his title was. It worked out pretty good, man.
So
it worked out good.
How would I have handled?
I wish I had more cash.
More cash. The fun part is, how would I have handled that if it didn't pass the test?
You'd be like, well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Exactly. So, Marcus, final details. How can we reach you other than the book and your website and your company? Tell us real quick.
Yeah, make sure you connect with me on LinkedIn, y'all. If you're listening to this right now, I'm dang good follow on LinkedIn, just like Lee is. And you can message me there as well. MarcusSheridan.com. Obviously, I speak around the world on these subjects: sales, marketing, leadership, communication. It's my jam. And if you want to win trust with your audience, whether it's one-to-many, one-to-one, one to your team, I will show you exactly how to do that.
You absolutely will. He's a great follow. I love to follow his content myself. So excellent. Thanks again, Marcus. I hope you stay well. And to the listeners, if you're listening to the podcast and want to see Marcus and I, video of this podcast and others are available in the podcast section of contentmonster.com. Once again, thanks for listening. Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Marketing podcast, a show brought to you by ContentMonster.com, the producer of B2B digital marketing content. Show notes can be found on ContentMonster.com, as well as aleejudge.com. To continue the conversation, be sure to follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform.